Several minutes of commercial-free football starts now. Here are the Purple Mortgage guys.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Mortgage Guys. First time I think we've ever done this where we've had three different recordings dedicated to one game. Goose, you and I jumped on Saturday at halftime to basically flush that one out and be done with it. History was made. We didn't see it coming. We couldn't even get a hold of Tanner. His phone was blowing up with so many text messages that it definitely was historic and memorable. Guys, we're just three guys that like to do home loans, but we love to talk about the Vikings, which is why we're here. And we thought we better jump on again today and recap this game with Tanner on board. First international show for one of us, which is cool. And wanted to, I guess, just jump right into the game that was the greatest comeback in NFL history. 33-0 at halftime. Cousins throws for 400 plus in the second half with, I believe, 4 touchdowns. Goes into overtime. We win it on a last-second Greg Joseph field goal, which does happen to be, I believe, Tanner's bold prediction of sorts. Probably not how we saw it playing out. But Tanner, give us your recap. I haven't even talked to you since the game ended. So what were your thoughts going through that game as you sat at halftime and into the third and fourth quarters? When did you start believing? And is this team, I guess, poised to make a run, or is it deeply flawed and another lucky victory on Saturday?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever have an experience, I feel like, in this lifetime again where I was so disappointed with the outcome of the first half. I just felt completely defeated. I didn't think there was any way that this team was going to be able to compete with even a 7 seed in the playoffs. Anybody could have came to town and kicked our butts. And then going into halftime, flipping the switch and just having a complete opposite group come out of the locker room. And I did watch your guys' little halftime bit that you guys did, and Goose had mentioned how we just wanted to see some fight come out of the locker room. And for me, even that was something that I wanted to see. I just wanted to see them get 3 scores on the board. I mean, come back, show that you can fight, that you're not like you didn't show up today. You made that clear, but that you can actually come back, put some points on the board, and that you're not just going to give up and throw it in the trash. And they exceeded those expectations, ended up having the greatest comeback in NFL history, which is so cool to be a part of, to be able to watch that during this holiday season. I think for me, I talked to Goose a little bit about it this morning, but I think after our second touchdown, I think it was CJ Ham had that second score. I think that's kind of when something flipped in my head where I was like, I don't know if we'll win, but I feel like there's definitely a chance that they could put some points up here in the second half and at least make this a game. And then one thing led to another. They scored again, and then they scored again and ended up tying the game. And then I think once I knew that we got that 2-point conversion, that there was no way that they were going to lose it. They came way too far down to tie that game. So not only did we have to beat the Colts, but we also had to beat the officials. In my opinion, that was the worst officiated game I had ever seen for the Vikings. I don't know about worst game I've ever watched completely, but for a Vikings game, it was the most, like, the referees should be stripped of their game checks. Like, there were so many missed calls. I rewatched the game twice already, and my second review I did yesterday, I actually went through and just tried to see how many missed calls I could find that were obvious that could have led to game-changing scenarios, and there was just at least 5 or 6 that could have affected the outcome of the final score. So for them to come back and beat not only the Colts but the officials in that game and pull away with a victory to win the NFC North, it was a lot of fun. So I'm super excited. I know these final 3 games probably don't mean a ton to us. We're in the playoffs, but still trying to fight for that 2 seed, obviously, against the Niners. And I think this team has shown that they can show up and play with anyone in this league, I think, on any given Sunday, but it just depends on which team shows up and if they can do it for a full 4 quarters. You're going to have to do that in the playoffs against teams like Philadelphia and Dallas if you want to make it to the big dance.
I feel like they should just come out Saturday and give the Giants 21 points on the board. Just pretend like we're down the second half and just start rolling, because it seems like it doesn't really matter where these defenses are ranked. Like the offense basically starts and stops. It's usually like internal issues, not so much the other team imposing their will. So I don't know. I'm I guess optimistic, but Goose, we talked about this Saturday. It was like it was two separate games. The first
Yeah.
half got to be to a point where it was laughable and it was over.
Yeah.
And then the second half, at some point, we all flipped the switch of it being over to, okay, maybe there's a chance to it actually happening. But it was like two separate games and two separate versions of the team playing. Goose, anything that I guess you've got from Saturday to today that you, I guess, changed on or any additional thoughts?
Well, I'm just I'm hoping that this does a lot for us moving forward. Tanner mentioned logistically we don't have a lot more to play for. But I think with the season that we've had and kind of the doubters, which I've seen a lot of Vikings fans kind of complain about the doubters, and some maybe complain too much about this team not being real. Like we always talk about, I think we're somewhere in between. But I think these last 3 weeks are going to be really important to learn how to play a complete game, because we've yet to do it through 14 games, which is pretty wild, especially to be at 11-3. But I think we have to take these last 3 weeks to figure out how to put it all together. I think I already heard some analysts, again, I'll never get over listening to people that are paid to talk on TV that like clearly didn't watch any of the game, because I heard more talks about like how incredible our offense was to come back from that game and kind of dogging our defense again. And I was like, okay, well, they gave up 1 touchdown and should have scored 2. So really they almost put up more points than they allowed if the game was officiated correctly. I'm really intrigued to see Duke Shelley. That was kind of crazy to see him play over Cam Dantzler, and not only play, but to play well. I've been following Tanner's Twitter account, and he brought up a lot of good like thinking points that maybe we'll never know the answer to, is how, like, if Cam wasn't anything other than getting outplayed, then why would you dress him? Unless, I guess, absolute like emergency, but they had Perry Nickerson elevated and then not suit up. So you'd think that would be your absolute emergency corner. So it just, but he had the highest PFF grade on the entire Vikings roster on Saturday, which is just unbelievable. I've always been a big fan of coaches that will play the player that's earned it over the draft pick or the person with the status.
Wasn't Dantzler, though, coming off an illness, maybe a little under the weather yet too? So that may have had something to do with it. But Duke Shelley played awesome, I thought.
Yeah, it's just normally you get a pretty good sense if a guy can go. And so the fact that they kept him active and didn't have Perry Nickerson active makes you wonder what it really was. And maybe we'll never know.
Guys, I want to pose a question to both of you. So we've seen, dating back to 2017 season, early 2018 with the Minneapolis Miracle, and then going into Philadelphia the week after, this season beating the Bills in what was the thriller of the year, maybe not anymore, but what was at the time. And then coming out extremely flat against Dallas. Tanner, you remember that pretty well. What do you think happens this weekend with the Giants? You'd like to think they've learned from it, but is it something you can learn from, or is it just human emotion? It's hard to flush that out and move on within a day or two.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a different team on Saturday. This team should definitely win out. There's no reason that they shouldn't. The NFC North divisional games do pose a little bit of a concern, but the Bears are so detrimented with injuries right now, and the Packers just seem like they've kind of tossed in the towel this year. They're not really playing for much either at this point. I think they are still eligible for the playoffs, but obviously I think that goes out the window if they lose tonight against the Rams. But I expect, as much as it's happened already this year, I would think that Kevin O'Connell is probably going to make that a point of emphasis now, and especially coming off of a game where it just happened again against the Colts. to make sure that this team doesn't come out flat. They got to have one of these games where they come out firing, and it's probably going to still end up being a close game. But I foresee one of these final 3 games, I feel like they're going to come out and get out to a 14-0 or a 17-0 lead. And they're going to get that.
And hang on, or just get out to it
and hang on. I don't see any of these final 3 teams that we're playing having enough offensive firepower to, I guess, get into a scoring affair. I guess I didn't really with the Colts.
Sure.
Yeah, there's no reason that they shouldn't. I'm hoping that they can get to week 18, hopefully have that 2 seed secured, and then maybe rest Za'Darius and guys like Danielle and maybe even Dalvin, and get those guys healthy before we head into the playoffs. So,
well, if they just have them watch the tape from the first half last week, that should be pretty motivational to not ever find themselves in that situation again. I think O'Connell said this morning on his presser, like, how do I make sure we never find ourselves in that situation again? And so, there's probably blame to go around with everyone there, but that's probably the place to start.
Watch a bunch of press conferences, and I don't know if this was addressed or not, and you guys can probably vouch for it if you did. But we're talking about Ed Donatel again. And the defense did play terrific in the second half. But if you go back and watch the game, they made that adjustment with a lot of pre-snap movement with guys like Harrison Smith. I know me and Goose talked about that, and they don't know where that pressure is coming because they were using him as a blitzer and in coverage as an extra defender in some of those scenarios in the second half. But in the first half, it was the same defense we've seen all year. They're rushing 4, not rushing any linebackers, hoping that you're getting home with 4 guys playing soft shell coverage, and they beat us up. And it looks like they made that adjustment in the second half, and I don't know if that's a KOC adjustment or if that's a Donatel adjustment. Part of me is just a little upset that we did come back to win that game because I felt like that was enough to just be like, man, I'm stripping you of your play calling duties.
Well, if it changed at halftime, that's pretty telling then.
Right.
If that's truly what happened. And
worked. I mean, I don't know how you go away from that success. I think the only way that we don't win this game on Saturday is there's gonna have to be some fluky things to happen, like against the Colts. Like I held out hope to come back against the Colts for quite some time until it got into that 30 range because it was just so fluky. The block punt, one of the fumble recoveries that didn't go our way. I mean, it was just
fourth down attempts, the pick 6. There was plenty of reasons.
Like, it doesn't feel like they're just beating us up. Yeah. So I think something similar would have to happen against the Giants in order for us to not come out with a victory there.
Sure. So our bold predictions for last weekend, we'll hit on those real quick. I think, Goose, did you say 3 turnovers or 3 interceptions by Matt Ryan?
3 turnovers.
I had Jalen Reagor getting some catches and a touchdown, and I think I see why he's not in the game. If you can't run the routes, there's probably a good case to be made that you shouldn't be on the field, and it feels like that's what happened on the 2 picks. Tanner, remind me of your bold prediction. I know score-wise we all had a win. Didn't play out the way we thought score-wise at all, but what was your other bold one?
I said 4 sacks as a team. I think they had 3. So
okay,
they did it, but got close.
Cool. Well, I don't think any of us had any inkling of what we were going to watch Saturday with the 33 points given up in the first half and then the second half that unfolded. But I think that's what makes it so much fun, guys, is just every week is so different. This has been the most entertaining season, regardless of how it ends, that I can ever remember, simply because every one of these games. Last night watching Washington in New York, it was like that's every Vikings game.
Yeah.
They end that way every single week for the most part. And that's just the normal. Like, we overlook it now. It's just expected. So heart medication for our Vikings fans. That's what we need.
They posted a stat during the game of how many like 1-score finishes that have happened within the last 2 seasons, this season and last season. And the Vikings were in first place, and it wasn't even close.
Well, I believe that.
Second place team was, I think, 7 or 8 games behind us.
One of my favorite moments of Sunday is we were down real bad, and I was just having a little look on social media, and I think a year or 2 ago, I would have had some of my Packers fans just dogging us, One, of course, they're not having the success this year, but it's like everyone knows about it now. Like someone was complaining about the Vikings being frauds, and I think we were down like 30. And this one of the biggest Packers fans I know had tweeted back to the frauds post and said, this will be a one possession ball game in the fourth quarter. And so now even the Packers fans are like, nope, they do this every week. They're going to come roaring back. And as much as I hate not watching a complete football game, there is something about a team that doesn't quit.
It's like our reputation now.
Yeah. I actually,
guys, let's
a funny story.
Go ahead.
I don't think I got to share it with you guys yet. I have a friend from college. His dad is a huge Colts fan. Big Colts fan. Entire family's Colts fans. They all went to the game. They had really good seats. And he was sending me snaps at halftime talking all this smack. And I just felt so bad for him. I didn't even message him after the game because I couldn't imagine like how deflated and defeated they were. But I think because the Colts don't come to Minnesota very often, so I think to go and watch your favorite team put 33 points up in the first half and then to be a part of the worst or the biggest comeback in NFL history has got to be pretty.
The closest thing I can remember was last year against the Steelers. We were up like 29-7 maybe or something and almost lost that game. It was like a Thursday night game.
Yeah, I remember that.
But yeah, I can't imagine being on the other end of that. That would be brutal. Griffin was on the steps at halftime almost in tears because they were playing so bad. And I'm like, buddy, it's okay. It's just one game. Doesn't really matter. And then the second half was just the exact opposite in the fourth quarter and overtime. So that was, of all the emotional roller coasters, that one had the biggest low and the biggest high, I would say, of all time for obvious reasons. So, guys, we got to get into our rants and raves here real quick.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off there, Goose, but we'll let you start. And if you want to, let's start with raves since we did win that game. The second half, anyway, was phenomenal. Give us a rave for the Saturday game.
I can't remember if I talked about it on Saturday because I know I've talked about it with a lot of people. I don't know what it was, but traditionally, my entire lifetime of being a fan, I've always been really annoyed by players who are flexing their muscles and kind of showing out on the field when you're getting blown out. It normally drives me.
My thunder, Goose.
It normally drives me bananas, but for some reason, down 30, when KJ was flexing and celebrating after every catch, there was just something about it. I think because everyone else was so deflated,
we needed
that I was like, it doesn't bug me. He's playing with, like, you could tell he doesn't think this game is over. And to have the best game of your career and really not even close, he backed it up. Obviously, I think if we stay flat, maybe I look at that differently. But I remember from the moment it happened, it just felt different. So I'm going to give KJ a shout out. I obviously not the box score. I don't know that anyone expected that, but this was a performance that I was hoping KJ to have this season when given the opportunity. And I think he was one of the main spark plugs for this team on Saturday.
Absolutely. I have two, Brent, so I want you to go first just in case you have one of them.
I'm going to go with Patrick Peterson. And just from what the reports were from the locker room on Saturday, Goose, there's record that you and I had zero confidence because we decided to record a dumb video to look at years to come, and we ended up looking at it 2.5 hours later. But I believe he was very upbeat and is like, we only need 5 touchdowns. And he's right. We only needed 5 touchdowns. But to comprehend that was even a possibility at halftime, he would have to have been crazy because there was no glimmer of hope. But it sounded like he was the one, to Goose's point with Osborne, maybe Peterson was the one on defense or at halftime to rally the troops a little bit. And I think he deserves a huge shout out for that one. So.
I think what kind of gives me goosebumps with that is like he wasn't just stating the obvious of all we need is 5 touchdowns to come back and win this game. It was like him instilling confidence in the defense and the offense. Like, we're not giving up another point. Like, we are shutting them down. You guys don't have to worry about scoring 6 touchdowns. You get your 5, and we'll take care of you guys on D. And I mean, he could have looked like an idiot after the game, and no one would have called him on it because you just say stuff. But I really liked Pat's kind of ferocity this whole season. I think we've needed it as a young defense.
Yeah, you guys both took mine.
Nice.
KJ Osborne was obviously the spark plug that we needed to get going. And Adam Thielen's been quiet all year, and even sometimes even in some of the biggest moments. And to have wide receiver 3 on this team come out and be the guy that's making those big plays in the second half to spark us and say, hey, we're not giving up, guys. We're still in this. That was really cool to see from him. And obviously, to Brent's point with Patrick Peterson, the way it sounded from Kevin O'Connell's press conference, it was kind of like they got into the locker room and it kind of sounded like Kevin wasn't even really ready to address the team. It sounded like Patrick Peterson kind of just came in and stole his thunder and said, hey guys, 5 touchdowns. This is what we need. We're going to get the stops. You get your touchdowns. We're going to win this game. And gosh, we don't have a lot of veterans like that on this team in recent years. So to have him come in and the way he's performed this year and be able to step up when we need him to be that guy in the locker room in that half to say that, man, that's huge, because I think a lot of young guys really look up to him in the locker room for obvious reasons, and they followed suit. But to be different from you guys, I would say that my rave is Duke Shelley. So to be a guy that's been a practice squad guy in this league, came in September, signed with the team's practice squad, got elevated to the roster, got a little bit of playing time and later in the game. I think Miami was, his first game where he got some real playing time and actually played pretty well. And then ended up being our highest graded defender yesterday. And you got a guy like Matt Ryan, who's been in the league a long time. You know, they're going to come into this game and probably say, this is their liability. This is the guy that doesn't have experience. We're going to be targeting him. And they did. They targeted him a lot. I think Michael Pittman still had, like 9 or 10 catches on the day. Granted, we play a lot of zone, so it's not all on Shelley for giving up those receptions, but they knew that they were going to target him, I think, a heavy amount. And he didn't back down once. He came up with a big tackle, I think, in the fourth quarter to set up a 4th and 1. I think the Colts tried to get us to jump on that play, which ended up not working, and they had to call a timeout to preserve that clock. So Duke Shelley would probably be my other rave. He deserves a lot of credit and respect, I think, from us fans.
It's crazy to think I think we're going the same spot. It's crazy that we named 3 different names, and I still feel like we're like majorly leaving out like Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins more passing yards than any quarterback in history in a half of football. Like he broke a record, and he's not in our top 3.
I was going to say he had four touchdowns and 400 plus yards in the second half.
Yeah,
it makes you wonder what actually was happening that first half. But man, that was one for the ages as well. So I think we could find a lot of rants and a lot of raves with that one. Let's get into rants real quick. I know we got just a couple minutes left here, guys. Goose, you want to start us off with that one also?
Yep. My rant is going to be who I picked for my what will we be complaining about, and that's Cam Bynum. I thought I didn't think he looked very good. I remember when we were down, I was curious to see what the PFF grades came in at, because I felt like he wasn't having a good game. There's just a handful of times where like it's 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7, and the guy that he is responsible for covering is at the sticks, and he was 4 yards off, and instead of like going up and making a tackle, like was just sitting there shoulders squared and like letting him pick up first down. I'm like, it just never, for someone who was you would think if Cam Bynum's woes were going to be anywhere, it'd be tackling coming from the cornerback position. So to be a poor coverage safety when you were a corner and in D1 high level competition, like, it just frustrates me, because especially the way that he carries himself. Like it kind of seems like he's got a big head, and he's probably our biggest liability on defense. So hoping Cam Bynum comes along a little bit more. Otherwise, I might be ready for the Josh Metellus experiment.
It's good. Tanner, what do you have? I'll let you go first.
Gosh, I don't even know if Josh Metellus would be an experiment at this point, and all the starts that he's had. I think he had 2 this year and 1 last year. He's like graded out well in all 3 starts. He's played really well. So
Yeah.
I think that'd probably be an upgrade at this point. But you gonna make me pick a single player again?
One first name, one last name.
So if I'm gonna pick one of 3, I'll go with Ezra Cleveland. He's actually graded out pretty well this year, and he is, I think, a heavy asset in the run game because of his ability to get out in space so quickly. I think that helps out Dalvin quite a bit, but he is just a complete 180 and a massive liability in pass protection this year, which shocks me considering he's a former tackle. But I mean, they shot that stat out again yesterday. Kirk Cousins has been pressured and hit more than any other quarterback in the league this year from the interior. And it's those 3 guys. It's Cleveland, Ingram, Ed Ingram, and Bradbury and Schlottman. But I think Cleveland was probably the worst of the 3, I think, on Saturday. So I'll go with Ezra Cleveland.
If Ingram could do us all a favor and quit stepping on Kirk, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
That was almost my breaking point as a fan when I saw Kirk fall over like a plank of wood again. And I was like, I swear, if that's Ed Ingram's big old paws stepping on Kirk, I'm going to lose.
Well,
my
you
mind.
knew it was. You knew it was.
And then next they show the replay, and sure enough, Ed takes a step over to the left, and Kirk's
and he doesn't go down gracefully.
Kirk's got to find a better way to fall. Like I don't blame him when you get stepped directly on your foot, but there's just something about the way that Kirk Cousins just
he looks like an Allstate Mayhem commercial. It's like, how did I find myself in this predicament?
Goodness, it's brutal.
I'm glad we could mention Ed, because then I can go after my guy Jalen Rager, who I've been pumping up the last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
dude, you have to run the right routes. You've got all the skills and talents in the world, but if you're not where the ball's going to be going, it's going to make him look bad. And I don't think either of those picks were on Cousins. I guess from my perspective, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but it looked like Jalen just one time he moved when he wasn't supposed to, and the second time he just gave up on the route. They could have both still been interceptions, but it seemed like it was very obvious with Cousins' reaction, and he doesn't usually react that way on a pick, but it was like, what are you doing? So,
yeah, I think the first one, I wouldn't blame Kirk for either. The first one is a little understandable because you kind of settle into the zone, and that's just an unfortunate play. The second one, I don't care if you say you couldn't see the ball, like you just run to the spot, because Kirk gets so much flack for not taking shots. And so when you give him a reason not to and give up on the player, I didn't think the progression was going to me, or drives me bananas because it basically proves Kirk's conservatism right.
Yeah. Well, guys, that was another recap of another extremely eventful game on Saturday. We got another one coming up Saturday against the Giants. Vikings, I believe, are favored by 3.5, so expect another tight one. You're going to pull a white off out at the game where they're going to be decked out in all white fans, so that should be fun. And should be another exciting game coming up this weekend. Tanner, we're glad to have you back. The show's not the same without Tanner Weber, so we're glad that you got your purple jacket on and you're there with us. Guys, have a fun week at the office. I'll reconnect with you again later here this week. We'll talk a little New York Football Giants, Minnesota Vikings. So
have a celebration margarita, Brent, for all of us in Mexico.
Skull.